in person, which I'd like that to happen someday after the pandemic's over. This would be my 135th trip to India. I've spent most of my professional career interacting with leading companies in India, and I've had the opportunity of having visited with many thousands of HR executives and business executives throughout the subcontinent. So I'm so delighted to be with you today. In my heart of heart, I'm an empiricist. And let me explain why that's important. In the bookshelves of bookstores literally around the world, including in India, there's probably no more discipline that takes up a bunch of space on these bookshelves than issues dealing with people. Leadership, culture, people in general, what creates value. So there's a lot of stuff on people. The problem is that most of those books are based upon ideas that somebody has, but they're not based upon research that connects. They could say what's happening, but do they have research that says this is what impacts business performance, and is it scarce? Because again, if it creates value but everybody's doing it, then there's no competitive advantage. So therefore, I'm an empiricist. That is, I put all the research that I do through those three filters, and you're going to see that today. So I'm going to put myself I'm going to now shift to presentation mode, and we're going to go through some of the material today. So this is what we're going to be talking about today. So here's the context of that we're in today. And the three questions that HR professionals need to ask themselves is, first of all, what is the rate of change in our business environment? In today's pandemic world, it's just a mess. But it's not just a mess in the short run. We'll fix the pandemic. And we need to be careful not to say because we figured out how to have virtual meetings, we've created competitive advantage. We need to do that, but that's not going to differentiate ourselves from our competitors, because virtually every company I know of is figuring out how to do work virtually. It needs to be done, but we live in a world of fundamental change relative to information, big data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning. Those are the changes in the business environment that are really creating turbulence. Plus, we're seeing companies are morphing out of their traditional boundaries. Google's competing now with General Motors, and Amazon's competing with Walmart. So we see all kinds of morphing and changes across industry boundaries, and national boundaries are shifting as China moving outside of its boundaries. India is exporting more executive talent than any country in the world. So there's a lot of change going on in the external environment. I've asked over several thousand executives in the last year, what's the rate of change in your market environment? And they say somewhere between a 4 and a 5 on a 5-point scale, 5 being really fast. And how fast are leaders making the big decisions relative to that? And then it drops down to about a 3.5. And then I asked, so then how fast does the total organization respond relative to that rate of change? And then it drops again. So you can see there's a gap between the rate of change and how organizations are responding. And that's the fundamental HR challenge. What should this target be? What do we want that organization response to be in order to create competitive advantage? And that's the challenge we have, is how does HR help companies to bridge that gap? So instead of responding to change, we're in the business of creating the change or being proactive relative to that change. That's the fundamental challenge. If we don't address that challenge through all of our HR process structures, policies, and processes, then we create no value. So the question is, how do we bridge that gap? And that's what we're going to be addressing. Now, the first issue is to recognize that we claim to be in the people business. And I always kind of have to laugh. And when HR says we're in the people business, and we say, what do you mean by people? Well, we say we're in the employee business. Well, that's 50% true. business consists of two groups of people, employees and customers and owners. Those are the two groups. So if we say we're in the people business and we mean only employees, we're 50% right. And in almost every university in the world, 50% is failing. So therefore, the issue is how do we bring together the 50% on the inside with the 50% on the outside? And that's the fundamental goal of HR. How do we make sure that the employees are connected to the customers and owners, and the value that are being created for customers, owners, are being created by employees? So how do we bring those two worlds together? Most HR departments don't think that way, but that's the ultimate goal. We're in the people business. People means employees, but also means customers. And the reason is, as my mentor years and years ago said, his name was Armin Alshin, he said that nothing you do on the inside of a company means anything to anybody unless it creates positive cash flow. Now, most HR folks maybe not think that way, but that's the way society tells a company if it's doing what society wants it to do. It takes money out, the customers take money out of their wallets, they give it to you, and that's how society tells you if you're doing the purpose, you're accomplishing the purpose for which society brings you into existence in the first place. So, and it's a simple logic, I don't mean to overcomplicate that. If you have a high supply for something, but for which there's no demand, the economic value is zero. So the question is, how do we, in fact, Armin Alshin used to, when he counseled doctoral students, he said, if you can't convince me that whatever you're studying, regardless of, he's an economics professor, if you can't convince me that anything you're doing, that you're studying within the company does not have a direct line of sight to creating cash flow on the outside from customers, then you're irrelevant to the economic proposition of an economics-based society. So first is that we're in the people business, but we have to make those people so happy, that is customers, that they take by how we manage our people on the inside, that the customers on the outside will give us money that tells us we're accomplishing their purposes. So how do we do that? Okay, at the University of Michigan, we have the largest database in the world on HR professionals. We have over 100,000 people now in our database, including, at least in my last count, I believe, it's the largest database on HR professionals in India also. So we have over 100,000 people in our database. And what we've done in this database is we've looked at how HR creates value across all different stakeholder categories. That is, do we create value? Let's start over here. For employees, do we create value for a line manager, for regulators, for communities, for investors, for customers, and for short-term business results? And what we know, just as a sideline, that sometimes we're preoccupied for what I do as an individual HR professional. We call those HR competencies. So almost every HR association in the world has developed its own HR competency model in the last 10, 15, 20 years. And what we know, based upon the largest database in the world, is when you compare HR individual competencies with the effectiveness of the activities of HR departments, that HR department functioning has 4 times the impact across all stakeholders than do individual HR competencies. Now, what that means is you can have competent HR individuals, but if they don't integrate all their practices, policies, procedures, practices, so forth, into an integrated focus on a North Star, on a clear focus, then they'll sub-optimize their performance. But most HR departments are kind of preoccupied with developing individual talent rather than creating an integrated organization. So the question is then, when we say HR, so HR departmental activities are more important than the competencies of individual HR departments. So what do we mean by HR department activities? Well, we found out statistically, this is for answer the first question, what is it the HR professionals do and HR departments do? And we found there's 4 categories, statistical categories. The first has to do with measurement, rewards, training, and development. The second we call strategically integrated HR practices. That is, to what extent do HR professionals have a line of sight to strategy? They develop and deliver the culture and organization capabilities that meet the requirements of that customer-based strategy. And then finally, do all of the HR practice areas, are they focused in terms of how they're designed and delivered to create the culture that helps us to execute our strategy, that helps us to win in the marketplace? That's what we call integrated HR practices. The third is HR's role in information management. That's kind of a new area. That's HR's role in applying information logic, big data. So those are the percentages, so they're kind of low. Whereas integrated HR practice areas has overwhelming the greatest impact in creating value for employees and line managers. So that's very interesting, and for regulators and so forth. But that trails off for short-term business results, external customers, and investors. Whereas HR's role in creating information management capability as an organization capability, that is by bringing external information in, helping to make sure it's analyzed correctly, it's fully utilized, it's fully shared and debated, and then, as I indicated, utilized. Then that has, if HR is involved in that, in creating that organizational capability, that has more impact on customers and investors than anything else we can do. Now, but notice this integrated HR practice area of strategy, culture, and all of the HR practice areas integrating to create the culture that executes the strategy across all stakeholders. If you add across the variance and impact across all stakeholders, and so this is a summary of what statistically we saw here.
Resistance,
strategy, culture, and HR practice areas. And that's summarized here: strategy, culture, and HR alignment. But the question is, what do we mean by culture? Here we don't mean warm, fuzzy culture. We don't mean fluffy stuff. We mean the culture. What is culture? Culture is how people need to think and behave together. That's what culture is. The research on culture, I've read over 150 different approaches to culture, and most of them say culture is how people think and behave together. That's what culture is. And so here's an example of FedEx. Now this is, but the culture we want to have is the culture that's required to meet the requirements of the marketplace. So here's FedEx. Now this is the FedEx culture for many, many years. They changed it here recently. It's your job to screw this up, make any mistakes, or drop the ball, or go below the game. Get it there faster, quicker, more reliably, more efficiently. Do it right, first rate, top notch, without a hitch, absolutely flawless. And botch this when you're out of here. History, finished, terminated, toast, lunch, gone, so dead, kaput. And one more thing, do it for less money than you've done it before. Now, some of you are going to say, this is not acceptable. This is nasty. This is condescending. It's unreasonable. This is being insensitive to our people. Well, let's talk about that for a minute. And by the way, everything I just said is true. But let's look at it. First of all, is it clear? Questions about what FedEx is trying to communicate. So number one, it's clear. So that makes it useful. A lot of mission statement or value culture statements are so fluffy or so vague, people don't know what they mean. Second, is it strategically accurate? That is, and by strategically accurate, I mean, if FedEx lives this, what happens to the customer wallet? That's my wallet. And what? what happens to customer wallet? And if FedEx lives this way, the customers take money out of their wallet, they give it to you. If FedEx does not live this way, then they lose. Then that customer wallet goes somewhere else. Third, of the customer. They didn't ask the question, what do we need to make our employees happy? They asked, what do we need to do so that we make, what words would our customers use to describe the culture they want us to have? And as they talked and argued that, fast, reliable, and low cost. Now, if we were all here present, I would ask everybody, who are these nasty, condescending, unreasonable, highly demanding, unforgiving people that would say something like, you know what? I'd ask everybody to raise their hand and, then say, okay, who are those nasty, unreasonable? It's not them, it's us. That's what we require. That's what we require to FedEx. And when FedEx does this, then we take money out of our wallet and we give it to FedEx. If FedEx does not live this way, then we have a problem. So once you understand this, fast, reliable, and low cost, now we know programs to give, what on-the-job developmental opportunities we provide, what we're going to communicate, how we structure our jobs, who gets promoted. So once we understand this logic, then everything we do in HR then combines to create that kind of an organization. Now, why focus on that is what we know is that logic, if we get it right and we're focused and we're disciplined, then that creates more value than anything else we can do in HR. And so in my few minutes that I've hopefully had with you, I've hopefully sent a clear message of that's what we do to create the greatest value across all stakeholders. It's a joy to be with you. I wish you all the best in your HR journey. I love HR. It provides us the opportunity of not just creating value for employees, but to creating value throughout the entire society by creating employees that can meet the needs and improve the quality of life for customers and investors and vice versa.